if you listen to me very well, I did agree with you that there are things that are still mystery. They are difficult to understand or explain as far as the scientist is concerned. But what I'm trying to want you to differentiate is between a puzzle, conundrum, something that is not yet known, right? Something that's obscure, it's ambiguous, right? In that sense of mystery. Yes, I agree with you, right? What I disagree with you about, though, is that there's something that is completely inexplicable, period. It just belongs in the mystery part of it. No, I don't agree with that. I'll give you an example. Anecdotally, sometime in the past, you go to uh, Nigeria, and there's a guy there who does the mysterious things that you're talking about, which is to make bees come to somebody that they're accusing of committing some kind of sin, right? So what this person was doing was actually to go and take the queen bee and put it on somebody that he has already made the investigation on his own, who is likely to have committed that sin, right? So he's gonna take that queen bee, let's say native doctor. He take that queen bee and then place it on the roof of that victim, right? And then a day later, the bees will converge on the roof of that property, right? And then this native doctor would have solved who committed the crime. But that's what it is. So when you bring light into that darkness, into those kind of things, a scientist will be able to tear that apart, right? But if you plant a CC camera, it's going to catch that native doctor going to place that queen bee on that. Now, are there other things that's still inexplicable? Yes. So this universe is very, very big. Like I told you before, you can't even comprehend it. A lot of people, including those who are against Christianity or who are, boy, just an annoying noise coming from somewhere. I don't know, maybe from Isaac Black. Please mute yourself so that the noise is not. So what I'm saying to you is that this is a big, big, huge universe. You don't even know where it ends or begins, just like the Bible said. You hear scientists talking about the Big Bang Theory. Sometimes when you start listening, they start going into faith. They begin to talk like the Bible said in Genesis, how the world began. Go and check it out. I'm talking about Pulitzer winners, people who's won Nobel Prizes in physics, those who are into astronomy, and those who cosmologists, right? Astronauts. They try to describe how the universe began, and at the end, they don't know the beginning nor the end, just like the Bible says, right? It says, I'm the beginning and the end. You don't know the beginning nor the end. That's how vast the universe. Remember, we are on a tiny speck of dust, not even that big. The entire activity of humanity. If you see, most people, I believe that pastors should go and bring cosmonauts to come and talk. Tell people how big this universe is first. So you know when you're talking about God, you know how big God is, how creation, how big it is. If I'm telling you, that's one of the maybe 99% of the ignorance that we experience and all the fights we're having. It's the ignorance of how big this universe is and what's in it. Huge. You have billions, trillions of galaxies in just one area, right? So when you know that, it's going to affect the way you look at things, right? It's going to affect when you're talking about little magic here and there compared to what scientists have already discovered by science. And you're talking about this little phenomenon, little crummy phenomenon. So having said that, like I said, you just have to you don't have to dwell or have a profession in this. Go and study the universe you live in. How big is this universe? It doesn't have a beginning, it doesn't have an end. So the whole planet here is a
Can I
tiny.
just a little bit, Pansat?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
All right. Thanks, guys. Uh, so to just add, I'm actually very much on the side of Pansat in his submission. Um, I think where many of the people who believe in mystery and spirituality tilt towards is the fact that they, they make it seem as though it's a period. So once we hear this, and that's it, nothing else. But what science has done, or what science is doing, is to say it is not conclusive. There's always room for improvement. There's always room for a new knowledge. And I think that's where Pansat is very right. I think the only bit where I'm a bit, I mean, I'm not like I disagree with him. The only bit where he's a bit contradictory is that there's a three prong. So in one step, in one phase he believes in science, which is very normal, like I do. Another part two, he's also a Christian, like like I am. And there's another part of him that's also a little bit agnostic, like myself as well too. So, which what that means to me is he's been a scientist, meaning that as time is going, as age is catching up on him, and as he's learning in life, he's
Joe,
also learning.
Joe, Joe.
This is not Joel.
Is that Joe?
No, it's not.
Oh, who's talking?
It's Papi.
Papi. So if you have a mix of the three that you mentioned,
Yeah.
is that not confusion?
No, it's
How
not.
can you marry the three together?
No, it's not. And let me explain to you. So there's a Christian faith which we all grew up with. So it wasn't something that was chosen, right? Or there's a religious faith. Let me not use Christian. There's a religious faith that we were all born in. We all grew up with. We met our grandfathers and our fathers, pastors. The entire community was religion, right? And then as you grow older, you start learning things with science. So science begins to help you define things that were unclear to you before, or define things that you had already assumed based upon religion. So religion could not be either traditional or orthodox religion or whatever the case is. Then as you get wiser, maybe also let me also include age. As you get older and wiser, you also begin to question certain things that are not very clear. And then that's what makes you agnostic. So you're not an atheist yet. You're not saying it doesn't exist because obviously you're already used to it. It's part of you because I mean some things have worked for you, but it's also a part of you that's also agnostic, where you are pretty much you're a skeptic. So you're like, this can't be true. Okay, so remember the example Pastor just shared about the honey, the queen bee, which is blatantly what usually happens. So the queen bee is kept there, and then there's supposed to be a spell that'll bring out the thief or someone who committed the crime. So he's found that bit out, and then he now understands that, oh, this is not necessarily true. But then there's also a part that also has that faith. So he has to be, that skepticism is what makes you keep learning more and becoming wiser. But the moment you say thunderbolt is real, and for that fact I'm not going to question it, then you are not you are not giving room for open knowledge. You're not giving room for growth, and that's the difference between science and religion. So religion has said there is heaven, there's earth. If you die, there's a spirituality. You go for judgment, and once you believe that, it's factual. Boom. But science says there's room for such thing. There's room for you to realize that there's growth, and I think that, and that's the difference. And ironically, that's actually even what God.
Papi, sorry,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
All those things I would believe that are mystery, and even to some extent to some things I would believe in religion, don't you think is due to our limitation in knowledge? Because there are so many things that we believe as mystery before that we have demystified now.
Yes.
Let me give you an example. I've experienced this thunderbolt that they are talking about. I was working in hospital, and they brought this man. They rushed this man in the middle of the night around 12 midnight. The man was convulsing, and then I was the doctor on duty that day. The wife rushed and some family member, they rushed into the hospital. So in the process of attending to this man, I checked his BP. The BP was very high, and my suspicion that day was that the man had a stroke. About 1 or 2 hours after, the man died. But shortly before his demise, the wife called me, and she was telling me that actually they were having fun before this thing started. So, but after that, I heard some people saying that is this thunderbolt that the man has a lot of wife, that the some of the wife used to have concubine, that is one of the concubine that laid this thunderbolt on the wife and that caused this. But me, I can explain it scientifically that the man died from stroke due to hypertension. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. And
So,
you're
but to
very right.
them, it will, and to them is thunderbolt.
Exactly. So what you just said now is exactly what Pansat is saying, and also where I'm coming from. So as of today, because you have gone to seek further knowledge, you've realized that that particular thing that happened to that man is not thunderbolt. It can happen. It happens to almost every human being that has high blood pressure, that has taken maybe Viagra, and also very active, having a very, when you're trying to have sporadic sex. Those are the things that will happen to you. But the naivety of the people who have held on to their spirituality to say, oh, the fact that this has happened because we've been told that there must be a thunderbolt, then it must be thunderbolt. They can't think beyond that horizon or that they've been told. And
Papi,
yeah, and also
you
before
know,
you
sorry,
yeah, Thomas.
I just want to draw your attention to something. There was a story, I believe it was in Kenya, where a married woman was caught with a man having sex, and they glued together. They couldn't separate both of them. So, can you explain that scenario? What
Thank
the
you.
sign behind that?
Yes. So that I think I've had this conversation on this room before. There's a name for it. It's called vaginal captivus. Oh no, so it's the
So, the
condition.
vagina grow teeth.
Yes. So the vaginal muscle,
Oh,
the vaginal muscle squeezes, like spasms, like the same way you have muscle pull. So it squeezes. It happens to people, especially when they want to climax. So it's a condition, but it's not a very common condition. It just happens to so what you saw that happened in Kenya happened to that woman. It happens to Caucasians too. In fact, if you watch Grey's Anatomy or so you'll see several of such conditions happen to Caucasians. Are those ones too?
so
Did they also use
the,
Magun?
the person that, okay. So, you don't believe it was a curse being placed on that woman?
No, there's no cause. But because that's what we believe in, we
I
believe
see.
there's no cause. So again, I just give you so it is the same thing that happens to your muscles. Your muscles contrast, and it's not the same thing. It doesn't happen to everybody. It doesn't happen to all women. It's almost like how the woman will say
So
it's not all
the
women.
muscles in the vagina is so strong that it's going to hook a penis and
Yes.
is it like
Yeah,
a, so
look,
is it like a
Adewale,
muscle in the legs or in the hams that
no,
So
no,
so
again,
strong?
no, Adewale,
Can we hold on, Pansat?
yeah,
Can we use other times? That time, that no. Let's use
yeah.
other.
Let me
Yeah,
use, I'm going to use another term, right?
yeah.
So,
Let's other time, please.
Adewale is some sort of obstetrical emergency in which the contraction of the muscles around that, I guess you could say vagina, right? So it depends on
Eh,
anatomical.
Even the Pansat, it can happen to a man. That's what we call priapism. That you
Right,
have this sustained erection and it
right,
will not come down. It can even be for days that
yeah, yeah,
your third leg will be so rigid that and it
exactly.
will be so painful
That's why
and it will not come down.
yeah, the term that he used, Papi used, is true. It's also called penis captivus. Okay, so it's an anatomical asymmetry, a difference in size and shapes, and lubrication issues, and all kinds of medical conditions that cause that vaginismus, right? So it's obstetrical in nature. I saw that video probably 2 years ago or something like that in Kenya. Now, could we be wrong? Yes, we could also be wrong. The point that we're making, though, is that this is a natural world. I said before, describing this universe and how big it is. Now, there are theories, there are many universes, right? And that when you look at cosmologically, what they call a string theory, right? But and then different physics will apply in those realms. But on this planet where we live and this universe we live in, the physics is pretty much known. The two types of physics you have that people like Einstein and others have studied and made theories out of them. So you can't go keep seeking to go into a realm that is not natural. We live in a natural world now because it's the three-dimensional world. There are universes by theory. I don't think that it's been proven yet, but there are universes that are four-dimensional, five-dimensional. Therefore, physics will not apply. But physics is the same here as when you go into space. I'm talking about far reaches of space, right? So when the world began with helium as gas, and then you start entropy, what's called entropy. Now, some of this is you have to look it up in order because it's a 4 or 5 hour show. We can't define everything. But if you hear a word and you don't understand what it means, then you look it up. So entropy begins almost immediately, and you start having chaos and decay on everything. So when you look at a star, it starts burning helium and then go to heavier gases and ultimately go to iron, and then that star dies. So if science could figure those things out, they could take telescopes and look back in time to the beginning or a few minutes or seconds before the world began. Science can do that.
Pansat,
Yeah.
how do we get here? I don't understand what you guys are saying. I
Okay.
step out from my system.
Okay. Let me say this, then I would.
No. I'm not saying you should not
No, no.
continue.
I
I don't,
understand.
just how do we get here? That's what I'm
Yeah.
asking. Yeah.
We got here, and that's a very fair question because it's kind of complex. We're not linear thinking here. We there are tangents, and then we go into those tangents, and they just free flowing. We're trying to discuss natural phenomenon, what you can observe, how somebody could believe in the Lord Jesus Christ at the same time want to be a scientist, where you have things have to uh, make sense. You're not going into mythic terms, right? So Papi dealt with all those very well, uh, concord with me in part. I believe there's probably just one fraction where he didn't, but he described what I'm saying, and it's converged with what Simba said the last time that he spoke. So we don't differ. It looks like it's all over the map, but what we're talking about is that you have your science, you have your religion. In religion, uh, um,
Which one do
faith.
you believe? Which one do you believe most?
I believe both. There's congruity in it, right? Science is not against Christianity. I'm not talking about religion. There's only one thing, and that's Christianity when it comes to religion, as far as I'm concerned, right? So, but you have to be able to put them all together. What you don't know that you don't know, it doesn't mean that it's not provable. It's just that you don't know. You don't know it. There are so many things. For example, in the Bible, there are things that Christ didn't even know when he was here, which is when Christ is going to come back again.
Can
Right?
I ask a
So,
question? Can I ask
sure,
a question?
sure.
As humans, it's human nature. We are very inquisitive as human beings, and the unknown part, the unknown over time, out of frustration, sometimes we tend to feel that void, even though we're not certain. There's this need to just know things as human beings. So beyond science, spirituality, of course, beyond science, how do you personally deal with the unknowns that you ordinarily understand that science for now cannot explain, but you believe exists somewhere? How do you personally deal with that, knowing that human nature, that yearning, the need to know is there? How do you personally deal with that?
Well, Prince Daddy,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can wait in. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Interesting conversation so far, but maybe Pansat. Well, actually, I'm actually surprised about some Pansat because he's well versed in the things of the Bible. So, I mean, and I hope he I hope he
No, no,
knows.
no, no, no.
He just
Princess, can you answer that question? Like, how do you deal with beyond science, what we can explain, and what your spiritual beliefs are? Like, and I said, the humans are very inquisitive, but we have that void, the need to know. So we can fill that up with garbage in the meantime. But how do you deal with that, the unknown that you cannot explain and science cannot? How do you personally deal with that?
Well,
Uh,
see,
uh,
that's a great question, but see, well, we can answer everything, but the unknown exists, and we should not be worried or perturbed about the unknown, because what we know is sufficient for us to exist, or like in the Bible, what we know about Christ in the Bible is enough for us to be saved. We don't have to know everything, but but science tries to explain the physical and the natural world, even things of God, of course. But science exists in three states, right? Well, solid, liquid, and gas, a gaseous state. But there's a fourth one, which is spiritual, that science can explain that. See, well, someone was talking about what happened in Kenya and this other spiritual stuff. Look, and I just learned a new term. What's it called? Vaginal captivus. That's quite interesting. But I'm not sure. In trying to explain it, I'm not
You
sure.
mean you mean Magun? What do you call Magun?
Yes, well, that's what they call vaginal captivus.
Yeah, that's real. Actually, that is real. That's yeah.
Well, I believe it's real. I believe it's real because it's spiritual. See, because science tries to explain things that happen as phenomena in the realm of the spirit, in a material, physical way, which is fine. Okay, but we should not discountenance the existence of spiritual things or spiritual matter. They exist and it is real. It's as real. See, there's this term. See, if you go into the realm of the spirit, you can feel things. That's why we say you deal with things in the tangibility of the realm of the spirit. Don't try. I'm not trying to sound any spiritual or whatever, but the spiritual world is as real as the physical world. But you have to explain it.
Okay.
You have to experience it rather.
Can we make this very interesting? Let's make this very interesting. Okay. So the science that we know and the math that we know, do you think is universal? Do you think like let's say pi or the current math that we know our own calculation, do you think it
Yes.
transverses across the universe, or is it limited to our own universe only?
Oh,
Only in our
oh,
universe.
great,
Only you when
great
you say,
question.
yeah, when
One,
you
one
say
second.
universal.
One
Okay,
second. To
sure.
that point, yeah, quickly to that point. See, there's something. Well, to us in our own realm in this universe, but there's a principle called the anthropic principle, as essentially to what you're saying. Pi, gravity, and all these things are constants that exist in our world, but beyond our world, it doesn't exist. Now, gravity doesn't exist everywhere in the universe. It does not.
No,
I think we
I'm
know that,
saying
right?
no, our own math, like beyond our own realm. Right? If you look at the Hubble telescope, I hope you've been following that, the newly launched one a few months ago,
Uh huh.
where many things that we've known for hundreds of years are now being disproved that's not been accurate. Because
Right.
but because it can see further into the galaxy, it can see way further than that. So I'm like, the science that we know, to 1 + 1 is 2, 2 + 2 is 4. How far deep enough is that constant? At what point does that change to something else? So
Well,
you know,
well, I'm trying to explain it in my little way, but I'm saying beyond certain. See, what answers that is quantum physics, and that's why quantum physics is quite interesting, right? Because really, quantum physics is between the real physics, the chemistry and biology that we know, and the spiritual world. Because quantum physics is not really is not like fixed or linear or constant. It changes, and that's the interesting about quantum physics. It can explain a lot of things to you. Okay, but if a normal scientist tries to understand it, they're not going to accept it. And Einstein understands quantum physics. It does, because if you listen to Einstein and study Einstein, he actually believes in God and the things of the spirit. And most scientists, just like you guys know, were Christian. A lot of them were Christian. They believed in God. So the need to want to like, oh, there's no God or there's no spiritual world. It's not true. It's just something we've not explored all the way that we don't know. But the people that know, the traditional rulers or the traditional religious people, the spiritualists, they know there's a real spiritual world out there. It does exist.
But Prince Daddy, sorry. Do you think that maybe what we believe in this spiritual, whatever the spiritual word, as I asked Pansat earlier, is due to our limitation in knowledge? And then once we don't have an explanation for something, then we tend to label it as being spiritual.
Well, I see what you're saying, but I totally
No,
disagree.
I think it's more of
They're mutually exclusive. If you ask me, there's a spiritual world because we can explain something and we chuck it as, oh, it's spiritual. No, no, no.
no,
There's
no,
a
no, no,
physical
no. Prince
world.
Daddy,
Prince Daddy.
slow down. You
You,
know,
you know why,
you
Prince
know,
Daddy, you know why I'm saying this? There are so, because in my practice, there are so many things that people have taught spiritual that are not actually spiritual and that are physical, and we have found solutions to it.
Exactly.
So to me,
So that's why you
so
were
to me,
agreeing, Simba. You were agreeing with me.
Simba,
And to
Simba and Pansat.
the BT's question, which I believe Prince Daddy handled very well. It's a fundamental thing to be able to listen to that, because he talked about this universe that we're in. There are certain fundamental guidelines, forces, if you will, right? That cover the nature here, right? Those forces, like he said, gravity is not it's gravity is universal for us here, but in other dimensions, let's say in other universes, maybe, but gravity, the weak
I don't
force.
understand what you mean by universe. The universe is not only the planet Earth.
No,
Exactly.
no,
How many
right.
universe do we have? Which
Well,
other universe are we talking about?
Can I
the
interject a
theory.
little bit?
Let me just deal with
let's
this.
not go into
Hold
black
on.
holes and
Yeah.
multidimensional.
So,
Yeah,
Not
those kind
quite
of
there.
things. That's what he's talking
Let's
about. The
not.
black hole and
do you
all.
mind me chipping a quick word?
Hold on, please, just 1 minute, because I'm saying I'm going off of what Prince Daddy answered, because I thought it was very apt. He talked about the gravity, for example, and of course you have the weak force, you have the electromagnetism, the electromagnetic force, and then the strong force. These are fundamental forces of nature here. Then he talked about quantum physics. And then he mentioned Einstein, who we know those laws, E equals mc squared, and things that he proffered. Those are theories that actually worked out. But when you go to the quantum level, they don't apply. So there's trying to be unification of the two, right? Prince Daddy, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what you were alluding to. But in conclusion, those scientists also realize, or they think, there are more than one universe. Okay, now when you talk about universe, we're talking about everything from galaxies, black holes, dark energy, planets, all those things. We have it here, but that's just in one universe, three-dimensional world that we live in. But
Correct. Yeah.
there could be bubbles, and then you have other universes that don't use the same physics that we use here. But to answer BT's question, the ones that we do that we use here it is universal here. The physics that we're talking about is here, is the same thing as pretty much every other place they looked at. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Let me just quickly answer that. Let me answer the second question first, and then I'll answer the first one, because the first one is a bit more interesting. So to the second one, and then this is where I disagree with Prince, is that no, there are several things that we know today that prior to now we thought they were spirituality, right? But then science has explained to us that, oh, these are not spirituality. And I'll give a very common example within the Yoruba pantheon. And then you hear stuff like maybe abiku, so kids that you give birth to them and then they will die, and then you give birth to them and then they will die, and then maybe eventually one of them will stay. And then sometimes they will say maybe those children are witchcraft or something, or I mean, they are named for such kids. But then we realize that today there's a very high chance that those parents were both either sickle cell carriers, and then they kept on having sickle cell babies were higher because of the area of the Congo Basin that we're in a very strong malaria centric places, and of course those things have a way of affecting your sickle cells. So you have those babies that they will die very. And now we know how to predict those things, even malaria. So there were several things that killed children whilst we were growing up that we had termed as spiritual stuff. But now,
Even phantom, even asphyxia. People
exactly,
deliver at home, they have asphyxia. Some people that have contracted pelvis that cannot deliver on their own, they kept on having children and they will be dying, and people will just deliver as being spiritual.
Exactly. So those things are things that we can cure today, right? So, and I think that's where I it's almost as though to that beginning of that question is let me use something that we also can relate. You remember when we were all young in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, we used to play monkey post as kids, right, in the streets. So you put a stone behind your feet, you join your feet together, you taking joint steps, then you put another post in there. Then when you want to make that post wider, you continue counting again. That's knowledge. So you start small, but at the very tip where you know it up to is where those forebearers, those prehistoric people, referred to as spirituality or referred to as gods. So where the knowledge was got to, they say, oh, from here on it is God, because we can explain it. But as civilization started happening, as we started commingling amongst ourselves, we started learning more and more from each other. And those things that were puzzles, because we were very pre-sciences.